Welcome to Marketing B2B Technology, the podcast from Napier. Today, I'm joined by David Nelson. David is the founder and CEO of Limelight. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Hi, Mike. Pleased to be here.
So we're going to dive into Limelight and the world of programmatic advertising in a minute. But before we start, can you just give us an overview of your career and what's led you to found Limelight?
Oh, so those who are seeing this on video will know that I'm very old. So my career highlights could go on for a long time. I had a software career in the insurance industry up until around 2007. At that point in time, I realized that insurance was never going to change and it was dull and very boring. And I wanted something that was a bit more challenging and fast paced. And I came across digital marketing. And I joined a company back then called Unanimous, where I worked for 5 years with Unanimous and 5 more years with Orange, because Orange acquired them. And I ran their technology and I ran their ad delivery platforms. Later on at Orange, broadening my scope to Europe. And then after that period of 10 years, which was super, we'd seen OpenX emerge from that business, and we'd seen the Orange ad network emerge from that business, some early kind of programmatic platforms. I moved to Rocket Fuel, who at the time were pioneering the use of AI in the advertising world. And I spent 5 years there building that business throughout Europe, and then left for what I thought at the time was going to be a summer off, which then turned into building the Limelight business. And so I spent a good many years now, not quite 20, but a good many years in digital advertising and programmatic in general.
Brilliant. And what problem are you solving with Limelight? What does it actually do?
So Limelight, we like to describe it as a 360-degree programmatic trading platform. And whilst we understand what that means, I do appreciate that that's not necessarily digestible. So let me try and explain. So our clients will use us to bring supply as a publisher to our platform, and then they'll find demand relationships that want to buy that supply, and we'll make an exchange happen in the middle, like a stock exchange programmatic execution. So some of our clients will be publishers, some will be ad networks generally. But the problem we solve is, how do you manage trillions and trillions of ad opportunities and find the right people to fill those ad spaces? That's what we do with our platform.
So most of our listeners are going to be marketers, so client side. I mean, what for them does programmatic actually mean? You know, you talk about letting people buy ads. You're obviously doing that on an individual basis really, really quickly. But how does that differ from, for example, going to a publisher and just buying, all the ads on the homepage?
Well, if you wanted all of the ads on the homepage, I think that would be a great thing to do. Go and find the right publisher. You have the challenge, of course, in the fact that there are, I don't know how many millions, trillions of publishers in the world. How do you find the right ones amongst that mix? You've got that challenge. Programmatic will alleviate that problem by making sure that you have access to a huge selection of the supply side, be it a web publisher or in-app or an audio or a CTV publisher. And then you have the challenge, if you learn it in the old school way, of placing an IO, finding the right person, placing your order, negotiating your costs, all of these things. Then you have the challenge of halfway through running your campaign, you realize actually you didn't want to run that campaign, you wanted it to change and do something else. So programmatic gets around all of these things, and it makes the whole process automated. So it's an operational saving. You have the ability to find more success in more diverse places. And you have the ability to adapt and change at the blink of an eye.
That's interesting. I mean, I think there's lots of different forms of programmatic advertising, and maybe, a lot of us looked at programmatic advertising a while ago and it was fairly simplistic. I mean, actually, what makes really effective B2B programmatic advertising campaigns?
So I think you're right. I mean, on the very simplistic side of things, you simply target a few IP addresses or some device IDs. You target a certain geography. It's obviously possible now to use that long on mobile devices and really tie that geography down. But then again, you're still reliant on geography. What I think is really interesting is that, in fact, the programmatic space over the last year or so has lost access to a lot of the data that we commonly had with the advent of GDPR and various other things. Data is now more strictly controlled, meaning there's perhaps less free available data. But that's made us think and challenge our status quo a great deal. So now we have the ability, and it's almost like we went back 10 years, and we realized that the context of advertising is critically still important. And Programmatic has the ability to bring huge amounts of data from the publisher side about the context to really understand where the ads are going. So I think this for me and for us is the future of really getting past broad splashing of advertising across an IP address and losing out on data. We come back to context. We truly understand where that ad is going to be displayed, and we understand the right moments for displaying that ad. And in that way, I think we actually will end up in a much stronger place than we were even 2 years ago.
So that context is really interesting. Can you give us some examples of some of that context information you could get through Programmatic that maybe you couldn't get another way?
Well, so an awful lot of the marketer's job today has changed from putting a banner ad on a website to actually engaging with content, right? And so the issue with content is you need to understand whether it's surrounded by negative or positive sentiment, for instance. You need to understand whether it is content that is within an environment that is supportive of your message. You need to understand whether it's sponsored by your competitors. You need to understand all these things, okay? So your publishers, in the programmatic sense, will be prepared and willing and will desire to share this type of data with a platform like Limelight's, because it makes their programmatic supply far more valuable. Okay, and so instead of getting a small kind of $1 CPM cost per mil, they'll get 10 or 12 because they've shared richer data about the context. And so there's a huge amount. I mean, if you think about just a simple web page, what you can understand from it, not just from what you see, but from the metadata that sits behind its construct, there's a huge amount of information that can be captured and shared. And publishers are prepared to do this because it increases their revenue. And of course, publishers like to increase their revenue.
I mean, that's fascinating. As someone who's perhaps, not very well educated, I mean, presumably the difference is you can buy the homepage of a publication, or you can actually put ads on that homepage when the stories are relevant to your product and positive about the kind of things you do. That sounds like a major boost in terms of performance of ads. Your ads are going to perform better.
That's the argument that we would make, but don't forget the programmatic also allows you to do both. So there's a homepage takeover, as we referred to it years ago, is still possible in the programmatic sense. You can still work on a programmatic guaranteed basis and make sure your ads are going to be placed and take up all of that content for a period of time or for the particular set of users, etc., etc. So both are possible, but for me, I think that the ability to truly understand the context, truly understand the moment, truly understand whether or not you are able to engage with that lead and nurture that lead through to the next stage of your marketing journey is critically important and incredibly valuable to marketers.
I mean, this all sounds very exciting, but obviously the market's quite competitive. There's lots of programmatic platforms. So I'm interested about Limelight particularly here. What do you do uniquely well in this market?
So I guess we're a B2B organization ourselves, right? So our partners that come on board are looking at the broad spectrum of programmatic platforms that they could work with, and they're asking, why Limelight? So it's a great question. And in a space that I think has become fairly commoditized in terms of technology, it's harder to stand out by saying, my AI is bigger than his AI. Everybody has very similar sounding features and functions. Our reflection point a couple of years ago when we started looking about who we wanted to be as a company came from the fact that actually we are partner first. Okay, so I think that because we're programmatic, because we're driving technology, people forgot in this world that we occupy that people still exist and people still buy advertising and people still make relationships. And so from our perspective, being partner first, which for us means making sure we make the right decision for the partner rather than making the right decision for Limelight. And at times that can feel painful, but it's the right thing to do ultimately in the long term. It means making sure that we are there to support our partners when they have a challenge. All too often, and we all use software, right? So we all know that very, very often it's very easy for a software company to say, well, it's not my problem. It wasn't my technology. It's somebody else's technology. Go and speak to them. So we absolutely won't do that. If our partner has a problem, and we're in a position where we can help because we have the knowledge and resources to do so, then we will lean in and we will help, even if it's not a problem with our platform. Programmatic can sometimes engage with multiple agencies to get a campaign live. And it's really, really important that I call it pierce the veil of responsibility. It's one of my NAF terms that I use intern the company all the time. But I want us to make sure that the partner's problem is solved. Okay, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. Let's solve the problem and move on and make everyone successful. So that's the key thing that stands out. I think the other thing that we're trying to do is, I think I said earlier on, I spent 5 years with Rocket Fuel selling a very, very good AI-driven tool, and they spent $200 million on AI, and it was amazing, truly. But on a human level, it was really unsatisfactory because at a human level, people just don't like that the machine is making decisions without them knowing what decision has been made. I hate it, in fact. And so what we've tried to do with the Limelight platform, yes, of course, we have AI, tick the box, but we also have the ability for our partners to, without code, tailor that AI and bring their DNA, their USP, their personality of their company to the system. So what I like to refer to as real intelligence. So we've got artificial intelligence, but the partner has real intelligence within their business. They might have operational systems that we can automate. They might have data that they own that we can bring to the platform. Whatever it is that makes them important and stand out, their own USP, as a partner-led organization, we want that to become part of delivery on the Limelight platform.
I love that. So, I mean, these customers, obviously there's lots of benefits. I mean, can you paint a picture of some of those partners that you work with, and the kind of businesses they're in?
Yeah, so we will work with publishers who have owned and operated sites and apps. They may extend their available supply by partnering with third parties, etc. It's a typical model that publishers have followed over the years, building their own ad network. We may work with ad networks in their own right who don't own and operate anything but sit in the middle, have really strong curation skills so that they know the scope and span of the supplier side of the world, or conversely, they know the scope and span of what agencies need and how they can deliver for them. And they will use our platform to either curate or to run agency campaigns with specific targeting requirements, or both of those things on the platform. And then we'll work with agencies on the demand side who just have an innate desire, perhaps, and then actually across all three of these, there's an innate desire to, in some way, become independent of the Google money, right? So the digital trading world of ad networks and digital media in general is pretty heavily Google dependent in terms of money. And there's a real desire across all of our client types right now to think about, well, how do I make sure I exist and I can independently carry on if Google decide they don't love me anymore? And so we're looking at a lot of solutions around that conundrum. And that's why they come to Limelight, I guess.
And I think the whole question around Google and Google's dominance of advertising, probably a good one for another podcast episode. But yes. I think anyone who's encountered some problems with Google will understand why that independence is an issue.
I'm really conflicted because actually I think it's horrid that we champion a company or an individual in this world, and then when they're successful we turn around and we bash them. But at the same time, they are a huge dominant player and some caution is required.
And I think, the reality is that particularly in the B2B space, not very many publications nor advertisers actually count as being significant to Google. You have to be very, very large in our space to even get on Google's radar. And I think that's a frustration of a lot of people. I
think that's the biggest challenge. Really, it is that when, I think you phrased it incredibly well, you have to become significant. But becoming significant to Google is almost impossible now because they don't have any peers, right? They are out there on their own.